Hello, friends. I notice one very interesting disease in human society. It can overtake absolutely anyone. It does not matter what education you have, whether you are rich or poor, whether you live in a prosperous well-fed country or in the most economically backward one. The name of this conditional disease is consumerism, a persistent thirst for constant consumption. This is a blind waste of money on various material goods and the belief that they will add real happiness to our lives. People work at the limit of their strength, experience a high level of stress every day. This disease makes us spin like a squirrel in a wheel, turning our life into a kind of Groundhog Day, home, work, work, home. But what is the cure for this disease? Someone accepts for himself a justifying thesis: happiness is not in money. But, as you understand, without them, without material resources, in the capitalist real world it is also quite uncomfortable to live. Some people, in an attempt to cure themselves of consumer mania, go headlong into religion, others try to build socialism, which is also a kind of religion. Some people adopt Eastern philosophy, which can be simply expressed by the phrase, "Get rid of your desires and this will rid you of all suffering." That is, desires are the cause of suffering. Buddhism, Hinduism and other religions, many philosophical movements repeat this narrative. Even in most branches of Christianity, for example, in Orthodoxy, money is perceived as something dirty, vicious, terrible. Get rid of them quickly and do not strive to acquire them. Which, as you can see, many people successfully implement in life. As soon as a more or less decent amount of money appears in their hands, they rush to get rid of it, like radioactive ash. To spend it quickly. We, Belarusians, have such a stable expression: money burns the thigh. This means that a person has an itch, a burning sensation where the wallet is, in the thigh area. The desire to spend it quickly. The subconscious fear of money, especially big money, makes us spend it faster and not save it. And this, as you understand, is also an extreme, which most likely will not make you a happy person. In this video, I will offer you some alternative, which, if you accept it for yourself, this alternative, will help you achieve both financial well-being and some peace of mind. Happiness in the broad sense of the word, will help to resist the animal passion of manic consumption. And the name of this medicine is thrift. Now you will disagree, say that this is a synonym for stinginess, this is ordinary greed, like, it does not suit us. Even psychologists usually say that hoarding is the lot of mentally ill people and that a harmonious personality will not save money. The FIRE movement has many critics. And I agree that if frugality takes on extreme features and becomes stinginess, then this is indeed the case. A person with manic saving, reaching the point of absurdity, cannot be called mentally healthy and happy. But we are not talking about stinginess, but about frugality, and the line between these two concepts is very thin. But it is worth learning to distinguish these terms for yourself. Unfortunately, the average person does not understand and does not feel any difference, or it is simply advantageous for him to generalize in order to hide his financial insolvency. It is advantageous for the same psychologist to criticize hoarding. He himself has never been rich and does not even imagine what it is like to be rich, but he already allows himself to judge, relying solely on speculative theories, theoretical theses. So what is frugality and what is stinginess? Agree, the difference is not only in the emotional coloring of these terms, but in essence of the concepts. At least thrift is a meaningful, advanced stinginess, taking into account all the negative features of stinginess. A stingy person always looks for the cheapest option. For him the decisive factor when choosing a product or service is the price. That is why there is such a wise saying, a stingy person pays twice. A thrifty person is someone who wisely, rationally manages his money, and therefore his resources, his time, ultimately. When a thrifty person buys something, first of all, he approaches the purchase thoughtfully and pays attention to the value, not the price. He tries to squeeze the maximum benefit out of each monetary unit spent. This means that a thrifty person values his time and his efforts, which were spent on the process of earning this money, and therefore values his life. And only if the benefit, the value outweighs, he finally decides to buy. Tell me, gentlemen psychologists, since when is rationality and prudence considered a negative quality in society, a sign of mental deviations? On the contrary. But for some reason, when they say, he is thrifty, for some reason this immediately causes criticism and hints in the spirit of, yes, it is better not to deal with such a person, he is not generous, you will not get anything from him for free, just like that, he will not give us a random gift. From such a person, as in the popular Russian proverb, you cannot even ask for snow in winter. Yes, it is true, others should not expect a gift, easy prey, a freebie from such a thrifty person, just as you should not hope for luck. If you think about it, there is nothing wrong with this. A much worse trait is to expect such a freebie, to expect something from others and be a dependent. American investor Warren Buffett said, "Price is what you pay, and value is what you get." The difference between these two concepts, price and value, is colossal. Just like the difference between the concepts of stinginess and thrift. A miser always focuses on the price, and a thrifty person, on the value. Do you feel the difference? To put it simply, a thrifty person is rather a smarter, more advanced miser. If you can control yourself, your emotions, desires and your money, then you will have more opportunities to control your life. You may have heard more than once from psychologists that, supposedly, the one who tries to control his money, save it, control his desires, is an unhealthy person. Psychologists seem to push us to the idea, life is short, you need to spend everything and only in this way can a person have a healthy psyche and happiness in life. But this, you must agree, is very controversial, this is the other extreme. Man, Homo sapiens, differs from other animals in that he has learned to subjugate much more resources than all other animal species. And our psyche is much more complex than the natural psyche of an animal, the paradigm of consumption and refusal to accumulate that is offered to us. Now I will try to analyze why there is absolutely nothing wrong with adhering to the principles of frugality, despite the unproven assurances of most psychologists. And the first reason is that frugality is useful, it is a natural desire to be free. So that other people do not have control over you and your time. In particular, your employers. Money is the equivalent of time, you must agree, the equivalent of invested labor and effort, a measure of success in the modern capitalist world. Whatever anyone says, but why are you so poor if you are so smart? So the greatest lever of control over you is your employer, since it is he who pays you money every month for your time. Think about how much power does the entity you work for have. What makes you go to the office or the factory every day, overcoming yourself, to work? The more debts, loans you have, and the less your own savings, the more other people can control you, the less free you are. Can you take a short break from work, take a day off or vacation at any time convenient for you? In the capitalist system, companies benefit from employees who are up to their ears in debt and various obligations, because they are more accommodating and flexible, and hold on to their jobs more tightly. It is easier for an employer to dictate their terms to such employees. Ideally, an employee should be tied down by loans for an apartment, a car, and other goods. Such a person is easier to control, since he will spin like a squirrel in a wheel, overcoming himself, wasting his health, nerves, his biological resources until the moment when he can retire well-deserved. If he will, of course. In other words, money is a way to control you, unless, of course, you do not have it, it is a kind of civilized way of enslaving people, a kind of voluntary slavery. Classical slavery was abolished long ago, but people have invented other mechanisms. Day after day, you yourself will voluntarily get up at 6 to 7 o'clock in the morning and go to work, because ahead there are more and more new desires, a new gadget, an iPhone on credit, new clothes, a vacation at an expensive resort, so that you are like everyone else on social networks. So that you are no worse than others. A truly imposed way of consumption is better than any whips and bars that once controlled slaves. But if you spend at least a little less than you earn, then you get a small element of control over your life, a chance to get out of this voluntary slavery. You will not take on unpleasant and too hard work, you will be able to find exactly the business that is your calling, since the sword of Damocles of need will no longer hang over you. You may say, but many people like to work, and they see the meaning of their lives in it. And it is true, it is not for nothing that there is a wise proverb, find a job that brings you pleasure, and then you will never have to work another day. But this is true only in theory, in ideal conditions. In practice, it is usually not like that at all. A person is burdened not by the fact of work itself, by performing some function, there is even some natural need for this, but by the obligation of this work, its inevitability. As soon as you, for example, had a hobby, for example, painting pictures. You liked it, after your main job you were so eager to take a canvas and paints in your hands to finally start doing your favorite thing. But then you decided to quit your main job and make painting your source of income. Now you do not paint what you want, but only what customers tell you, what sells better. If you used to do it for your own pleasure, now that it has become your profession, when customers expect results, and you cannot afford to delay drawing, it begins to weigh you down after a month. In practice, this is what happens. You can give hundreds of examples when a hobby that you liked at first, the moment it becomes work, turns into a hated activity. The obligation of any work, labor is something that always weighs you down. You like to shoot and upload videos to YouTube in your free time, but as soon as you start doing it professionally, starting to shoot videos and edit every day, it can lead to burnout. And we work because we need a livelihood. No matter how much you love your job, I am sure that if you were given a choice and an opportunity not to go to it, you would do it with pleasure. Usually, everyone waits for and enjoys a vacation. Well, or at least, they would reduce their working hours so that the work process brings more pleasure. This is if you really like your job. Well, at most, people would usually quit their jobs without regret and do something more interesting and something they really enjoy. The bigger the safety cushion, the amount of savings, the less a person begins to depend on their salary and receives more and more resources from sources of so-called passive income. This is how capitalism, from the word capital, works. Frugality, when used wisely, brings psychological comfort, some confidence in the future. A thrifty person, before paying for a product or service, will first think about how much time, hours, days, weeks, months or years, he will have to work to get an amount equivalent to this future purchase and whether it is so desirable. How much joy and real benefit, ultimately, a future purchase can bring. If you buy a new iPhone, a car that costs incomparably more than your capabilities, then you are wasteful and live beyond your means. In some economics textbooks, I came across such a guideline, for example, that a car should cost no more than 8 monthly salaries of a person. That is, if you earn, for example, the equivalent of $1,000 per month, then the maximum amount that would be rational to spend on buying a car for personal use, meaning, of course, not for work, but as a personal means of transportation, so the amount should not be more than $8,000, that is, 8 monthly salaries. Not for $16,000 a new car from the showroom, as many people with low incomes like, and then in everyday life they have to save on everything, denying themselves elementary things. Most likely, a used car will be the best solution at this level of income. And what should those do whose monthly income is completely meager? Well, then, except for a bicycle, unfortunately, you will hardly be able to afford anything. These are strict guidelines, either you should increase your income, or reduce your expenses, simple mathematics. If the cost of the car exceeds a year of your work, or even 2 years, then think about whether you need it for such a price and how much real benefit will this purchase bring. Perhaps it would be worthwhile to relax more, spend more time with your family instead of driving this new expensive car. After all, this is the equivalent of several years of your work. It is somehow not customary to think about this. But even having too much income, it is also stupid to reduce the level of consumption to the minimum. It is stupid, having millions of capital, to continue to eat cheap sausages, denying yourself a steak. This undermines health and in any case, it is not proportional. The syndrome of deferred life is also a big problem, an extreme that people with a certain psychotype usually face. It is worth being thrifty, but not saving on those things that make you really happy. For example, you should not postpone your personal life and having children, and investing in education, in your closest and dearest people is, perhaps, the best option possible. In fact, when buying new expensive things, people usually get only a short-term surge of joy, the release of the hormone dopamine and other neurotransmitters. After some time, the purchase no longer pleases us, and the psyche requires more and more new emotions. It is very useful to replace this short-term dopamine with another important hormone, oxytocin. This is a hormone that is released from the pituitary gland into the blood when communicating with loved ones, relatives, with affection, communication with children, a feeling of care and love for your loved ones. Try to replace and direct your emotions in this direction, on social interactions and communication with your family members, and then the problem of consumerism, spontaneous purchases will recede into the background for you. Happiness is not in acquiring as many different things as possible, but in enjoying life. But do not live for today, it is worth thinking about the future. As one of my friends rightly noted, you sleep much better on a financial pillow than even on an orthopedic one. Yes, you are right when you say that you can't buy happiness with money. This is undoubtedly true, but you can buy relative freedom and financial independence with money. When you put aside a little money from each paycheck, if you have learned to manage it, it is as if you are returning a small piece of freedom to yourself, a piece of time that was irretrievably spent by you on the process of earning this money. There is such an expression, pay yourself. Before spending money, paying everyone around you, the baker, for baked bread, the hairdresser, for a haircut, the manufacturer of clothes or household appliances, you should first pay yourself, put it aside for some big goals. Namely, for investments in the future pension, if you like. The point of putting money aside is not to pine over gold, but to have the opportunity at any moment to buy something that is of great value to you, to your family members. Homo sapiens is designed in such a way that he constantly strives to compare himself with other people. If you earn $1 million a month, but all your neighbors, friends, relatives earn $10 million a month, then you will most likely feel unhappy, a loser in this ranking competition, in the race for success. Theodore Roosevelt once noted, comparison is the thief of joy. If you are used to deliberately comparing yourself with others, then it will always seem to you that you are worse in something. Although objectively this is not so. You can envy some acquaintance, and he, in turn, can, on the contrary, have long been envious of you, and in a completely different way. For example, in the fact that you have more free time, or in the fact that you have a friendly and loving family. The definition of envy is simple, envy is suffering about the success of another person. Envy is inevitable, it is one of the emotions experienced to one degree or another by all people. We buy things we don't need. With money we don't have, often on credit. To impress people who don't care about us. This is a quote, a phrase by the famous American writer and journalist Chuck Palahniuk. It characterizes the modern consumer society very well. The desire to seem, and not to really be, this is what you will most often be punished for. We often forget about our closest and dearest people, but we try to impress those who don't care about us. You ask, but if human nature is such that we cannot avoid comparison with other people, then what should we do? I have a little life hack. The essence of this technique is that if there is a need to compare yourself with someone, then it is better to mentally choose as an object for such comparison a person who is not the most successful. For example, sometimes it is useful to watch a video not about the life of show business stars or famous people, but, for example, some documentary about the life of ordinary people who bleed, sometimes, no less than you. It is worth comparing yourself with those who live worse than you, who are poorer than you, who are more stupid than you. This will raise your self-esteem and allow you to be a little happier, to feel relieved. For example, sometimes it is useful to watch travel bloggers, not those who visit rich countries, such as Switzerland or Germany, but, for example, those who come to northern Sudan, to the poorest countries in Africa. When I watch, for example, how some blogger wanders through the poor slums in India, or visits Nigeria, I understand how lucky you are to be born in your country, where not everything is so bad. A feeling of happiness inevitably arises only when compared with those who are less successful. I will immediately stipulate that such a life hack is good only for finding psychological comfort, happiness, fighting against self-comparison, not for professional development or for self-improvement. There, everything is just the opposite. You should reach out and look up to those who are stronger, more successful. We are talking exclusively about the feeling of happiness. So, a person's thriftiness is, as I have already said, also caring about your future. If you lead a thrifty lifestyle, regularly invest, this is equivalent to the fact that you are sending resources to your own future. And when you borrow, it is the same as stealing money from your future. If you make irresponsible decisions today, then the only person you are hurting is yourself, only in the future. If you do not put aside at least 10% of your salary every month, spend absolutely everything without a trace, then you are taking a risk, you are leading, so to speak, an unhygienic lifestyle. Like not brushing your teeth, not taking a shower every day. This should become a habit. At least 10% is the minimum that absolutely any person can do. Both a person with a small income, and with a large one. 10% of income is a hygienic level, below which it is better not to fall. More is already optional, for example, for supporters of the FIRE movement, this is early retirement. This is not suitable for everyone, but absolutely anyone can approach spending rationally and free up 10%, pay first of all to themselves, not to others, but to themselves. Pay yourself first is a famous phrase from George Clason's book, The Richest Man in Babylon. A person does not really need much to be happy, everyone has their own sense of proportion. There is a comfortable concept called enough. The idea is not to earn and spend as much as possible, but to have enough material goods, not to chase after the unnecessary, the superfluous, and not to compare yourself with other people. In Sweden, for example, they actively promote such a concept of life. They call it a special term, lag. This is a philosophy of moderation, literally meaning, just as much as you need. The Swedes know how to find a balance between the categories of too little and too much. I think this is one of the reasons why Sweden is one of the most successful and desirable countries in the world to live in. How can you determine this level of enough for yourself? Various scientific studies prove that health and good relationships with loved ones make us happy first and foremost, and having money simply helps you think less about this money and solve some local or minor problems that inevitably arise along the way. Friends, I hope these thoughts were interesting and useful for you. Subscribe to this channel, thank you for your attention and see you soon.